Imagine a world unlike anything we know today. A civilization living in harmony with nature, yet steeped in mysteries that challenge our understanding of human history. A world where knowledge, spirituality, and technology intertwined in ways that seem almost impossible to modern eyes. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the mid-20th century in the caves near Qumran, offer tantalizing glimpses into this ancient world, revealing fragments not only of religious texts, but of a civilization that predates the Great Deluge described in biblical accounts. These scrolls, painstakingly preserved for millennia, speak of a life that was sophisticated, complex, and in many ways astonishingly advanced, hinting at truths about the human experience long before the floodwaters reshaped the earth. The hook lies in the scrolls, subtle yet profound references to the pre-flood world. Among the writings are passages describing the sons of God walking among mortals, imparting knowledge that was both a gift and a curse. These texts suggest a human society deeply engaged with the cosmos, the natural world, and spiritual wisdom that modern civilization has only begun to rediscover. Scholars debate the exact meaning of these references. But one thing is clear: the scrolls preserve memories of a world lost to time. A world of towering cities, monumental works, and human ambition reaching heights that rival our own. The Dead Sea Scrolls are not a single narrative but a mosaic of writings, each piece a window into the intellectual and spiritual landscape of an ancient society. Some scrolls, like the Book of Giants, provide narratives of pre-flood individuals whose lives intertwined with celestial beings. Others, including the Temple Scroll, detail laws and rituals that hint at a society organized around ethical, spiritual, and possibly scientific principles. Together, they paint a picture of humanity as a civilization with a consciousness more expansive than we often assume. They were aware of cycles of time, of the need to live in balance with the natural and divine order, and of the consequences of hubris. Evidence from the scrolls suggests that the pre-flood world was marked by a profound tension between knowledge and power. The so-called Watchers, angels who descended to teach humans, imparted skills in astronomy, metallurgy, medicine, and agriculture. These gifts accelerated human development, but also introduced ethical dilemmas and social conflicts that reverberated across generations. Texts hint that humanity struggled with these gifts, sometimes wielding them for harmony and survival, other times allowing them to foster greed, violence, and arrogance. The scrolls are careful to document both the promise and peril of this knowledge, framing it within a moral narrative that warns against the misuse of wisdom. Archaeological studies, when paired with the textual evidence from the scrolls, support the notion of a sophisticated pre-flood society. Tools and implements, some buried for millennia, suggest advanced craftsmanship and an understanding of engineering principles that would later seem rediscovered in the post-flood world. The scrolls' attention to cosmology detailing celestial movements and their influence on earthly affairs reveals a people who observed the stars not merely as a backdrop for myth but as an integrated system of knowledge influencing agriculture, rituals, and daily life. In this way, the Dead Sea Scrolls bridge the gap between myth, history, and science, offering a lens into a civilization that may have been more scientifically aware than we often credit. Beyond the material and intellectual achievements, the scrolls highlight the spiritual dimensions of pre-flood life. The texts describe rituals, prayers, and meditative practices aimed at connecting humanity with divine principles. They emphasize ethical behavior, community cohesion, and the importance of harmony with the natural world. Scholars note parallels between these instructions and later religious and philosophical systems, suggesting that pre-flood knowledge influenced subsequent civilizations long after the floodwaters receded. The scrolls hint at an understanding of human nature, morality, and cosmic order that resonates with modern insights, suggesting that ancient wisdom has enduring relevance. Some texts reference individuals living hundreds of years, a phenomenon echoed in biblical accounts. While literal interpretation remains controversial, symbolic reading suggests that these long lifespans may represent periods of learning, societal contribution, or spiritual development rather than purely chronological years. The scrolls connect longevity to wisdom and ethical conduct, implying that the pre-flood world valued the cultivation of knowledge, virtue, and social responsibility across generations. This emphasis on ethical advancement as a measure of human development contrasts sharply with modern metrics focused solely on material achievement. The Dead Sea Scrolls also explore themes of environmental stewardship and the consequences of human activity. Certain passages warn of imbalance and disruption, hinting at ecological crises that may have preceded the flood. While the texts are poetic and symbolic, they convey a clear sense that pre-flood civilizations were aware of their impact on the natural world, understanding that human actions could either sustain or destabilize the delicate balance of life. These warnings resonate with modern concerns about climate, sustainability, and the ethical use of resources, underscoring the scroll's enduring relevance. Among the most compelling narratives are those that describe interactions between humans and beings from other realms. The Book of Watchers, in particular, recounts the descent of angels who taught humanity arts and sciences but also engaged in transgressions that disrupted the natural order. These narratives convey complex ideas about the intersection of free will, divine guidance, and human responsibility. By examining these stories, scholars gain insight into how ancient societies understood moral and cosmic causality, framing human history within a larger spiritual and ethical context. Moreover, the scrolls provide glimpses into pre-flood social structures. References to hierarchical systems, councils, and communal decision-making suggest organized societies with legal, religious, and educational institutions. The texts reveal concern for justice, equity, and the collective welfare, hinting that pre-flood civilizations valued social cohesion and ethical governance. Even when recounting tales of corruption or conflict, the scrolls emphasize the moral lessons inherent in these stories, portraying societal collapse not merely as punishment, but as a consequence of ethical failure. The scrolls' preservation of astronomical knowledge is particularly striking. Some passages describe cycles of the sun, moon, and stars with remarkable precision, indicating a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. These observations informed agricultural calendars, religious festivals, and possibly navigation. By combining meticulous observation with moral instruction, the scrolls portray a civilization in which scientific knowledge and spiritual insight were inseparable, demonstrating a holistic worldview in which understanding the cosmos was integral to understanding oneself and one's place in the universe. As we explore these texts, the line between myth and history blurs. The Dead Sea Scrolls challenge modern assumptions about pre-flood life, suggesting that human civilization has experienced cycles of advancement, catastrophe, and renewal long before recorded history. By carefully analyzing the scrolls, researchers attempt to reconstruct a world in which humans engage deeply with ethics, knowledge, and the natural world, learning lessons that were both profound and perilous. The texts reveal a civilization aware of its potential for both greatness and destruction, emphasizing the moral responsibility that accompanies knowledge and power. The narratives also touch upon themes of secrecy and forbidden knowledge. The scrolls imply that certain wisdom was restricted, shared only with those deemed ready to receive it. This notion reflects a recognition that knowledge carries consequences and that premature or reckless use can lead to disaster. In the pre-flood context, these warnings may have been both literal and allegorical, illustrating the delicate balance between human ambition and ethical restraint. The scrolls, in this sense, function as guides, both preserving historical memory and imparting moral instruction for future generations. the language of the Dead Sea Scrolls, with its poetic rhythms and symbolic imagery, enhances their enigmatic quality. References to giants, celestial beings, and pre-flood cities evoke a world simultaneously familiar and alien. The texts invite readers to imagine landscapes of immense grandeur, technological marvels, and moral complexity, offering a vision of pre-flood life that is both awe-inspiring and cautionary. These writings, though fragmented, convey the scope and ambition of a civilization grappling with knowledge, ethics, and the consequences of its actions on a cosmic scale. We have glimpsed the intellectual, spiritual, and ethical dimensions of pre-flood life, uncovering hints of technological sophistication, astronomical insight, and moral contemplation. Yet much remains to be explored: the full extent of human ingenuity, the complexities of societal organization, and the profound lessons embedded in these ancient texts. The Book of Giants, one of the most evocative texts discovered among the scrolls, introduces a cast of extraordinary individuals whose lives illuminate the tensions of pre-flood existence. These giants, not merely physical in stature, but extraordinary in intellect and influence, moved through a world brimming with wonder, yet marked by moral ambiguity. The scrolls describe their achievements, architectural marvels, mastery of celestial phenomena, and profound insight into the workings of nature, but also their transgressions, the excesses and ethical lapses that sowed seeds of discord. The narratives portray them not as mythical caricatures, but as embodiments of human potential in its most amplified form, illustrating both the promise and the peril inherent in knowledge when coupled with unchecked ambition. What strikes scholars most about these accounts is the precision with which pre-flood knowledge is described. Techniques in metallurgy, agriculture, and medicine appear to surpass what one might expect for a civilization thousands of years old. The scrolls reference tools and materials that suggest an advanced understanding of natural resources, engineering, and even early chemistry. Some passages hint at complex irrigation systems, methods of food preservation, and innovations in constructing durable structures capable of withstanding the forces of nature. While the archaeological record is fragmentary, it aligns in intriguing ways with the textual evidence, suggesting a society that blended practical ingenuity with spiritual purpose. Astronomical knowledge emerges as a central theme in many scrolls, revealing a preoccupation with the rhythms of the heavens that shaped both daily life and spiritual practice. Detailed descriptions of solar, lunar, and planetary cycles suggest careful observation over generations, tied to agricultural calendars, ceremonial events, and divinatory practices. In some texts, the stars themselves are imbued with moral significance, representing principles of balance, order, and divine oversight. This fusion of empirical observation with ethical meaning underscores a worldview in which understanding the cosmos was inseparable from understanding human responsibility. The pre-flood people recognized that knowledge, like power, required discipline, humility, and ethical stewardship. Interwoven with these practical and scientific pursuits are profound spiritual narratives. The scrolls describe rituals designed to attune individuals to natural and cosmic rhythms, emphasizing meditation, ethical conduct, and communal cohesion. There is evidence of educational structures within pre-flood communities, where knowledge, both spiritual and practical, was passed down carefully, often within specialized lineages or circles of learning. The texts hint at a sophisticated system of mentorship, teaching, and initiation, suggesting that wisdom was considered sacred and potentially dangerous if misapplied. Certain teachings were restricted to those prepared to uphold their ethical and social responsibilities, reflecting a deep awareness that knowledge carries consequences far beyond the individual. One of the most fascinating aspects of the scrolls is the depiction of moral and ethical struggle on a societal scale. The pre-flood civilization, while brilliant in many respects, faced profound challenges in balancing individual ambition with communal well-being. Conflicts between rulers, scholars, and spiritual leaders are described in rich, allegorical language, revealing a civilization wrestling with the tension between freedom and accountability. These narratives highlight recurring patterns: unchecked power leading to corruption, misuse of knowledge producing social discord, and the eventual erosion of harmony between humanity and the natural world. Scholars interpret these patterns as cautionary tales, offering timeless lessons about the responsibilities that accompany intellect, innovation, and leadership. The notion of giants, often misunderstood in popular retellings, carries layered meaning in the scrolls. Beyond their literal description, they symbolize human potential, amplified by access to extraordinary knowledge and capabilities. Their successes are remarkable cities built with precision, sophisticated tools, and records of observation, but so too are their failings. Tales of indulgence, violence, and ethical lapses permeate the narratives, illustrating that capability without wisdom is a force capable of catastrophic disruption. The scrolls consistently present a duality. The same knowledge that elevates can also corrupt. The same power that sustains can destroy, emphasizing that ethical discernment is inseparable from mastery of any domain. In addition to these moral dimensions, the scrolls offer glimpses into social and political organization. Pre-flood societies, as depicted in the texts, were not chaotic collections of individuals, but complex networks of governance, communal responsibility, and social norms. Leaders were expected to embody ethical principles, councils deliberated on communal matters, and laws often codified in ritual and moral instruction guided behavior. These structures suggest that pre-flood civilizations were deeply conscious of the interplay between authority, justice, and collective welfare. Even the text's warnings about societal collapse are framed not merely as divine punishment, but as consequences of human neglect. A reminder that ethical failure carries tangible ramifications for communities and the natural world. P3. The scroll's treatment of human longevity further reinforces the interconnection between morality, knowledge, and societal development. Lifespans described in the texts, often hundreds of years, are understood symbolically by many scholars as markers of accumulated wisdom, ethical growth, and societal contribution. Individuals of extended life were expected to act as custodians of knowledge and moral guidance, serving as anchors of stability in a civilization capable of both great creativity and profound destruction. This conceptualization reframes longevity as a societal and spiritual responsibility, rather than a simple biological phenomenon, underscoring the pre-flood emphasis on ethical cultivation as a measure of human advancement. Another recurring motif is the interplay between humans and divine or semi-divine beings. The Book of Watchers details the descent of celestial figures, sometimes described as angels, or sons of God, who imparted critical skills and knowledge to humans. These interactions, while providing technological and intellectual advancement, also introduce dilemmas and conflicts, illustrating that the acquisition of wisdom is inseparable from ethical responsibility. The scrolls emphasize that guidance alone cannot guarantee moral alignment. Free will remains central, and with it comes accountability. The narrative repeatedly underscores that misuse of knowledge, even when divinely gifted, leads to social, spiritual, and environmental consequences. Environmental awareness appears repeatedly throughout the scrolls. Pre-flood societies are depicted as attuned to natural cycles, aware of the consequences of human action, and deeply invested in the sustainability of resources. Certain passages suggest ecological imbalance, describing landscapes altered by human excess or corruption. These references are both literal and allegorical, reflecting an understanding that civilizations rise and fall in accordance with their stewardship of the natural world. In this regard, the Dead Sea Scrolls are remarkably modern in sensibility, offering cautionary perspectives on sustainability, ethical use of resources, and the interdependence of humans and their environment. Scientific, spiritual, and moral threads converge in the scroll's treatment of astronomy, architecture, and agriculture. Knowledge was never compartmentalized. Observation of the stars informed planting cycles, ritual calendars, and civic planning. Architectural innovation reflected an understanding of both material science and societal needs, while agricultural techniques demonstrated deep ecological awareness. The pre-flood civilization, as portrayed in the scrolls, exemplifies integration. Every aspect of life, from the spiritual to the technical, was interconnected, forming a holistic framework that balanced advancement with responsibility. Modern civilization, in its compartmentalized approach, may have much to learn from this ancient synthesis. The texts also highlight the consequences of secrecy and selective knowledge. Certain teachings were deemed dangerous, restricted to those prepared for ethical and social responsibilities. This demonstrates a sophisticated grasp of pedagogy and risk management. Knowledge was powerful, but only when paired with discernment and moral guidance. Unauthorized or reckless use could destabilize society, disrupt natural harmony, or lead to personal and communal catastrophe. The scroll's emphasis on these principles suggests a civilization deeply aware of the weight of intellectual and spiritual power, and the necessity of channeling it wisely. The pre-flood world, through these writings, is revealed as a society simultaneously brilliant and vulnerable. Innovation, insight, and moral reflection coexisted with temptation, conflict, and ethical lapses. The scrolls describe cycles of growth and decay, emphasizing that no civilization is immune to the consequences of its choices. The stories of giants, celestial teachers, and human communities provide a nuanced portrayal of ambition, responsibility, and resilience, highlighting lessons that remain profoundly relevant. The scrolls portray the pre-flood era as a world of extremes. On one hand, it was a time of intellectual and spiritual flourishing. Human societies had achieved extraordinary technical capabilities, advanced astronomical understanding, and sophisticated systems of governance. On the other hand, this period was also marked by moral lapses, ecological disruption, and social fragmentation. The juxtaposition of brilliance and vulnerability is a recurring theme, illustrating that progress without ethical restraint can lead to inevitable collapse. The stories within the scrolls emphasize that knowledge and power, no matter how extraordinary, carry responsibilities that, if ignored, result in profound consequences. Central to this narrative is the theme of the Watchers, the celestial beings who descended to guide humanity. The scrolls detail not only the knowledge they imparted, including metallurgy, agriculture, medicine, and the observation of the heavens, but also the unforeseen consequences of their interventions. Their gifts accelerated human development, yet simultaneously introduced ethical dilemmas and social tensions. Some humans misused these skills, leading to greed, corruption, and violence, while others struggled to maintain moral alignment. The scrolls suggest that these dynamics created a feedback loop. The more knowledge humanity acquired, the greater the challenge of using it wisely. This tension between empowerment and accountability is a central thread in understanding the pre-flood collapse. The Book of Giants, in particular, dramatizes the human consequences of overreaching. Giants, symbolic of both extraordinary capability and hubris, engage in monumental feats of construction, exploration, and innovation. Yet they are also depicted succumbing to indulgence, violence, and ethical failure. The scrolls consistently frame these narratives as cautionary, illustrating that advancement without moral guidance is inherently unstable. The giant stories are both literal and allegorical, showing how societies can elevate certain individuals or groups to positions of enormous influence while neglecting the ethical and social responsibilities that such power demands. In doing so, the scrolls warn of the fragility of civilizations, that relies solely on technical prowess or hierarchical authority without embedding wisdom and accountability into their structures. Another important focus of the scrolls is the relationship between humans and the natural world. Pre-flood civilizations are described as acutely aware of ecological cycles and environmental consequences. The texts contain vivid imagery of altered landscapes, disrupted waters, and overexploited resources, emphasizing that the misuse of knowledge had repercussions not only for human societies, but for the world itself. This awareness of ecological interdependence underscores the sophisticated worldview of pre-flood humanity. Realization that ethical and practical stewardship of nature was inseparable from societal stability. These warnings resonate powerfully with modern concerns about environmental sustainability, climate change, and the ethical use of technological advancement. The collapse of pre-flood civilization, as portrayed in the scrolls, is both dramatic and instructive. Societal structures, while highly organized, ultimately failed when moral integrity was compromised. Leadership faltered, communities fractured, and the accumulated wisdom of generations was threatened with obliteration. The texts describe this downfall with poetic intensity, linking the erosion of social cohesion, the misuse of celestial knowledge, and the corruption of ethical principles to the catastrophic events that culminated in the Great Flood. Importantly, the scrolls frame this collapse not as divine caprice alone, but as the predictable outcome of human choices, principle that continues to resonate with scholars, ethicists, and historians. Interwoven with these narratives of decline are reflections on resilience, continuity, and hope. Even as civilization faltered, the scrolls emphasize that knowledge, ethical principles, and spiritual insight could endure, provided they were preserved carefully. Certain texts suggest that teachings were intentionally hidden, safeguarded, and transmitted to select individuals or communities, ensuring that lessons from the pre-flood world could guide future generations. This idea of preservation reinforces a central theme of the scrolls. Human progress, while vulnerable to collapse, is never entirely lost. Wisdom can survive catastrophe if it is intentionally safeguarded, understood, and ethically applied. The texts also revisit the motif of human longevity and the cultivation of wisdom. Individuals of extended lifespans are depicted as moral anchors, custodians of knowledge, and teachers of ethical principles. Their extended presence allowed for the transmission of complex cultural, scientific, and spiritual knowledge across generations. However, the scrolls make it clear that even prolonged life does not guarantee moral or societal stability. Wisdom must be actively exercised, taught, and integrated into communal life, or it risks being overshadowed by human weakness and folly. These reflections reinforce the scrolls' overarching message: knowledge, power, and longevity are gifts intertwined with ethical responsibility. Pre-flood cosmology, as recorded in the scrolls, also plays a significant role in understanding the civilization's trajectory. Detailed observations of celestial movements were used not only to guide practical activities like agriculture, but also to reinforce moral and spiritual understanding. The heavens were conceptualized as a system of order and balance, a mirror for the ethical and societal order on Earth. Disruption in either domain, celestial or terrestrial, was seen as indicative of misalignment, whether through ethical lapses, neglect, or hubris. In this way, the scrolls link cosmic observation, social responsibility, and spiritual integrity, suggesting a civilization profoundly attuned to interconnected systems of cause and effect. Ethical guidance is pervasive throughout the scrolls. Human ambition is consistently framed in moral terms. Achievements are celebrated when aligned with ethical principles, and failures are emphasized when virtue is neglected. The texts illustrate that innovation alone cannot sustain a civilization. Moral discernment, communal responsibility, and respect for natural laws are equally vital. By weaving moral instruction into historical and mythical narratives, the scrolls create a compelling framework for understanding the rise and fall of societies, making the pre-flood era both a historical study and a philosophical exploration of human potential. As the narrative unfolds, the scrolls reveal that catastrophe, the Great Flood, was both inevitable and instructive. The collapse of pre-flood society, precipitated by ethical failure, misuse of knowledge, and environmental imbalance, serves as a dramatic culmination of the civilization's trajectory. Yet, within the catastrophe, the scrolls preserve hope, the preservation of wisdom, the survival of ethical principles, and the continuity of human potential. The flood is depicted not merely as destruction, but as a reset, an opportunity to re-establish balance between knowledge, morality, and the natural world. It is a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming consequences, lessons endure, and future generations can build upon the foundations laid by those who came before. The scrolls' final teachings encourage reflection on the cyclical nature of human civilization. Growth, achievement, hubris, and collapse are presented as recurring patterns, emphasizing that human societies must continually integrate wisdom with innovation. By documenting the rise and fall of pre-flood civilization, the texts offer both a historical account and a moral compass, highlighting the timeless interplay of knowledge, responsibility, and ethical action. The narrative demonstrates that human progress is contingent not merely on technical skill or intellectual capacity, but on the cultivation of virtue, foresight, and communal integrity. In conclusion, the Dead Sea Scrolls provide a remarkable window into the life, achievements, and challenges of pre-flood humanity. They reveal a world of extraordinary sophistication, ethical complexity, and cosmic awareness, illustrating both the potential and vulnerability inherent in advanced civilizations. The texts preserve lessons about the responsible use of knowledge, the integration of ethical and practical wisdom, and the consequences of human actions on societal and environmental stability. They remind us that history, myth, and morality are deeply intertwined, and that the past can illuminate the present if we are willing to learn from its triumphs and failures. Ultimately, the scrolls offer not only historical insight, but enduring guidance. They challenge us to consider how knowledge, power, and ethics intersect in our own time, prompting reflection on the ways we steward technology, society, and the natural world. They remind us that progress untempered by moral responsibility risks repeating the cycles of the past, while wisdom applied with care can ensure continuity, resilience, and the flourishing of human potential. In this way, the Dead Sea Scrolls are not merely relics of a lost era. They are a timeless testament to the enduring quest for understanding, balance, and the harmonious integration of intellect, spirit, and ethical action, a message that continues to resonate across millennia and offers guidance for the challenges of our own civilization today.